This is week 1 of my 16-week plan to deadlift 700 pounds conventional. This is also my first post to the channel I will be using to document the progress to 700 pounds and my progress as a whole to break into the competitive scene of powerlifting, strongman, and arm wrestling. I also plan to excel at a couple other key sports, but that's a secret for later. You'll see. As for now, my current best feat is getting 675 to my knees with a power bar. I did fail that lift, however, with the fact that I'll be switching to a deadlift bar and 16 weeks of locking in for deadlift, I think it'll make a big enough difference to make this lift happen. From there, we'll see how my time management goes with work and all, but I plan to automatically turn that around and break a few records. My main weakness in the deadlift is my hamstrings and my off-the-ground strength, which is why for this program I'll be doing a lot of RDLs and pause deadlifts. I do also have a crunchy left shoulder right now, which isn't typical for me, but I've just been spamming resistance band stuff to try to work around that while I lift. It's also hampered a lot of my push volume, which isn't too detrimental right now since I'm focusing mainly on deadlift, but that could become an issue later on when I want to program for more push. To set the scene, I also want to go into all the unknown variables I have for this program, which kind of make it pretty hard to gauge how this is going to end. Number 1 is that my main strength in lifting isn't muscle size, although you do have to have some of that to be strong. The main thing I bank on is the fact that I'm a neural dominant lifter, which allows me to tap into a much higher percent of my muscle fibers than average, I guess. That gives me the advantage of being able to lift much heavier weights than my muscles should be capable of. And because neural drive has such a mentally dominant aspect to it, my strength varies wildly depending on emotional state. It also happens to be in line with what my main fitness goal has been since I've started training, which is what people call sleeper strength, being way stronger than you physically look. So while I do genetics play a part in my specific strength advantage being neural drive, it may have also been something that I trained in by what my goals were this whole time. But along with that, which I did not know at the time that I started training, are the negative side effects, which there is so many, and it still damages my training patterns now. Number 1 right off the bat is, again, my muscles aren't as big. So when I go and pick up, say, 600 pounds, the time it takes for me to recover from that lift, because I was using so much percentage of my muscles and even my joints and back, everything feels it for sometimes weeks. So my training and programming has to be completely different than what you mostly see online nowadays. So basically my volume tolerance is actually terrible, maybe outside of accessory movements, which is where I get lots of my volume from, because I just can't do it from main compounds. But I'll cut that off for a second to show you an example of that mental stimulation I was talking about.
Our numbers are too great. We are legion.
I do recognize that a lot of lifters have pre-lift rituals like that, but for me, I think it takes a much bigger effect on the lift I'm about to do than regular, just because of that neural dominance that I have. Another negative side effect is when life gets in the way and your recovery and sleep are altered even further, which is a kind of pit that I'm in right now. Actually, I get about 6 hours a night, and my diet isn't perfect. When you stack that on top of the recovery requirements that being a neurodominant lifter takes, everything can cascade and progress basically stops and everything goes in reverse. So I have to tread especially carefully on all my programming that I'm ever probably going to do until I gain a lot more muscle, which I may do in the future. But for now, that's how it's going to be. And for me right now, the biggest hiccup in my training, the biggest thing I'm focusing on is actually making sure sleep and diet is in check more than probably any regular powerlifter has to, just because of all those negatives I was talking about. This is the outlook I've had on training for the past 6 to 8 months or so, and it has made a significant improvement in my progress. I got from a difficult 585 on some days to being able to rep that, and I've deadlifted 650 with a stiff bar. I'm just bringing those numbers up to provide reinforcing evidence to the claims I've been making. The reason I bring all this up now is so that for now and into the future you can understand why it looks like I'm not doing that much volume in total. Although that is just for my body and my circumstances. So as always, I would recommend you experiment on your own training first before you decide to switch over to anything different. And it gives you another thing to think about, a new reference point. If you are also a neural drive dominant lifter, or you're dealing with life circumstances that make it difficult for you to train at the highest level all the time. If that's you, then this lower volume approach to training, at least for the compound lifts, could be something that's worth experimenting for you, and it could massively improve your progress overall. Patience with the lower weight sessions, though, is a very key point, because I myself do often push it farther than I'm supposed to, and it ends up ruining my whole program. And what I'm doing here is going to be a perfect representation of what I was just explaining. Being week 1, the weights are already lower by design of the program, but I also have to limit how much I force myself to increase volume, which is why my set count isn't very high, even at this weight. So the real purpose of this session isn't muscle taxing, but to prime my nervous system to be perfectly accustomed to deadlifting, which is what you see here. My form is immaculate. I'm also keeping track of how heavy the weight feels to my nervous system, because that's another important thing to look at, so I can map out the next 16 weeks of progress. Doing all that while still at the same time making sure I do practice a little bit of neural drive, because it's important for me to be able to keep that up, as it is a pretty hard skill to be mentally aroused enough to make maximal neural drive happen on a consistent basis. Which that skill, I think, will be an interesting new piece to the competitive scene that I don't see very often or at all in any of the athletes that are out there today. And on top of that, my training being completely different from theirs will be something new to look at. Something that could possibly even slightly change the general consensus among lots of people on how training should be done, depending on body type and goals, I guess, for whatever that person is looking for in their own training. So really all this to say is that my end goal would be 180, 185 pounds body weight and a 700 pound conventional deadlift, which for me that translates to about an 800 pound sumo, which is pretty unheard of, I guess, in the strength world. So that's what that would do. And on top of that, I think the neural drive component, which is very unseen and not as widely known as part of strength training, will be a very interesting and eye-opening thing for people to see and adapt into their own training. And also something that will be a real spectacle in competition. So all that's my reason for doing this and what my goal, I guess, for the future is going to be. For now, though, as you can see, I'm working at these light 405 pulls. I just did 3 sets. My first 2 were regular. My last one you're about to see was pause reps, which are going to help me a lot off the ground, and I might take them on my knees. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and do this. I plan to be uploading this again, and I plan to compete at the highest possible level in the future, possibly world class, which I believe I'm capable of, and that is what you're going to see out of me. So I'm just going to let my last set play. I edited it a little bit so you can see a bit of the mental work I'm putting into getting my neural drive on point for this set.